and we're live. So, my name is Menussi, and this is the first time trying to do a weekly Chassidut class about the weekly portion, Parsha Shavua. And it was actually just spontaneously started yesterday, at least the idea to start from this week, so that we were able to grab Bereshis and start from Bereshis, start from the beginning. And what I want to explore and open up today is a very, very beautiful, interesting idea, which I came across a few months ago, and then it sort of grew in my head, and it tells, you can say it tells a kind of hidden story within the first story of Genesis. So as we all know, there are two stories of creation. There's the first story, which takes place over 6 days, and then the Shabbat. And then we have the second story, which focuses on Adam and Chava and the snake and the sin, and so. But the first story has a hidden story that's buried within it. It's like an underground stream that's sort of flowing hidden, and it has to do with the things that are pushed away when creation is formed, when creation is made in the first 6 days. Every day of creation, there's an element which God creates, but then for some reason pushes away and rejects, or diminishes, or even kills. And you don't see it on the surface reading of the Torah, but it all comes through Midrashim, and you can see that it's a recurring motif, that you have this element that's rejected, and the story is what is going on with these rejected elements. Why were they created in the first place? And now that they were created, why are they so early on rejected or pushed away? And of course, this is a deeper story about everything that we experience and feel that has been pushed away or buried or died or disappeared or is not coming to fruition for some reason. Now, the paragraph I came across was from Rabbi Kaplan, well-known American rabbi. He wrote quite a few books, mostly about Kabbalah. One of his books is a interpretation of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, his stories. And one of his most famous stories is the story of the lost princess. It tells about a king with a daughter that he loves very much, but then one day he said something, one moment of outburst, and he said something bad that may be taken by the not good, by the evil one, or something like that. And then she disappeared. And then the whole story is about how to find her back. And it's usually explained that this lost princess is either the Shekhinah, the feminine aspect of divinity, which is supposed to reside within our world, but which has gone into exile. And on a more psychological plane, we can say that it talks about our own soul, or our own psyche, maybe our own hearts, that were there, but then they got lost, or buried, or covered in dirt. And now we deeply regret it, and we want to reclaim, refind that lost element within us. So Rabbi Kaplan talks about this, and he says, in Kabbalistic terms, you would have to say that this element, which is rejected, is something that in Kabbalah is called the Sphira of Malchut, of kingdom or kingship. It's the last Sphira, right? In Kabbalah there are 10 Sephirot, 10 divine emanations, with which Hashem creates the world and continuously recreates the world and pours energy and light into the world. And then the final Sephirah is called Malchut, and it has a tendency to fall, or to collapse, or to be pushed away. But it's really like a seed that's being sown within the ground, so that it can later re-emerge and be refound. And then there's an added element of beauty or splendor or majesty that comes with it due to its being lost for some time or fallen for some time. So one of the persons that are considered an archetype of Malchut is King David. And King David always experiences himself as falling. He was never supposed to have been born. He was supposed to have died before he was born. That's what the Midrash says. And Adam, the first man in the world, foresaw that he would not be born, and he donated 70 years of his life to David. And therefore David was supposed to fall, and he knows that every moment of life that he gets is a gift. And from this experience of not being able to hold myself up, he experiences so acutely his need of Hashem. And that's where Tehillim comes from, where that resolves. That he prays and he longs for Hashem because he knows how much he needs Hashem. And right now in Sukkot, in the Festival of Tabernacles that we celebrated, we say every day, Harachaman hu yakim lanu et Sukkat David hanufelet. May the Merciful One bring up the falling tabernacle of David. And it didn't fall in the past. It's not the fallen, it's the falling. Sukkat David hanufelet. It's always falling, always needs to be picked up. This is the Sfirat Malchut.
I was so quick actually when they asked this question. I was at a place on the phone right, and they asked this question of like, what does it mean to the fallen?
The fallen in the present, yeah.
Like nobody knew.
Yeah. So this whole class is about trying to see this Kabbalistic symbol of the Malchut, which is falling or caused to fall because Hashem creates this Sfirah and this element of the word, the Shekhinah, and then he causes it to exile, just like in the story. It seems like an accident, but it isn't. It's something that's supposed to happen so that something new would emerge out of this. And you can say that the name that I gave to this class is the Great Spiral of Being, because there was this historian who wrote a book called the Great Chain of Being. And he talked about this idea that exists in many philosophies and mythologies and theologies, that creation, the world, is made up of a huge chain of beings, starting with God, and then the angels, and then man, and then the animals, and then all the way down to physical matter or to the devil or things like this. And he talks about a chain. But there's something in Judaism, and particularly you see it in Kabbalah and Chassidut, in the inner dimension, or the Sod level of the Torah, that there's another hidden hierarchy, which is an upside-down hierarchy, which says that Malchut was already foretold or embedded or rooted within the highest Sefirah, which is Keter. And the reason it goes down, it's Yeridat Tzorach Aliyah, it goes down in order to uncover divinity in a deeper place. Yeah. The idea is that the higher something is originally, the higher something's nature is, or its root, the lower it descends when it comes into this world. So the idea is that this whole experience of falling, of collapse, of rejection, of things that go down, is in order to discover divinity in a deeper, darker, farther place, in order to let it shine with even stronger light than before. And you can say this is the whole story of the creation of the world in itself, not just creation of elements within this world, but this world. Why was it created in the first place? Because it hides divinity. It hides it in order to rediscover it, and there's going to be an added value to this rediscovery. When you discover something lost, when you remember something forgotten, there's an added element of joy and of appreciation, which wasn't there before. And you can say that the entire world exists in order for divinity to rediscover itself through us in this way. Now this applies to the whole world, but it applies in particular to elements within this world. Elements that experience this world in a more intense and direct way, in a more existential way. That they enact, or they experience, or they manifest this worldly experience, the experience of being created and being far from Hashem, and then rediscovering Hashem in a more intense way than other elements. And the idea that he says is that in each and every day of creation, 6 days, right, there's one motif, there's one basic idea that there's an element which falls down and is buried and then regrows and becomes higher than what it could have been and what other things could have been. But this general motif now has 6 variations on a theme, like in music, when you have a theme that then you have variations on that theme. So he says that this theme occurs again and again in each of the 6 days of creation. Each day there's something which is rejected or pushed away. And he doesn't say this explicitly, at least in the paragraph that I saw. But if you open up the Midrashim, if you open up the Kabbalistic interpretations, you can see that each of these rejections is meant for there to be someday an elevation. So that Yisroel I spoke about the great chain of being, and I want to speak about the great spiral of being. That this chain of being is really all about the reason the chain descends all the way down is for the element that goes all the way down to suddenly re-emerge and then sort of flip the whole chain back up and raise everything back to its divine source.
Yeah. It's created in this world?
It's created, immediately it's rejected or falls down or diminished, or we'll see in a minute. But, that's all this was just introduction. So now we want to go into this. So we'll just say what the 6 things are. Yeah, so again, I just saw one paragraph that he says, what is the malchut element of each of the 6 days that is rejected? He does go into how this rejection is just a step, a necessary step, in order for it to regrow and reemerge and then become higher than what it was rejected for, than the other non-rejected element. So first we'll just say what the 6 things are, and then we'll go over them one by one and see what they mean. So, first day. First day, it's creation of light. But after the light is created, it's separated from darkness. And Hashem says that only the light is good. He never says that the darkness is good. So, the darkness is in some ways rejected. Darkness becomes, indirectly, is called bad or evil. Because Hashem saw the light that it was good, but he didn't see the darkness that it was good. And Rashi says he separated the light from the darkness so that because light is good and darkness isn't, and they're not supposed to mix. So he made a separation. So we have a rejected, very abstract, very general, but a rejected entity, which is darkness. Second day, Hashem separates the water. There's water from the first day, and he separates the lower waters from the higher waters, and he puts a firmament in between. But according to the Midrash, he didn't just separate the waters. He took the lower waters and pushed them down, and they started crying because they were pushed away. The higher waters, which are pure, we can drink rainwater without a problem, they're close to God. But the lower waters have been pushed down. It's not just a separation, it's a rejection of the lower half of the waters. And then they become salty because they cry. And then you can't drink seawater or ocean water. And so that's the rejection of the second day. Third day, interestingly, here it's not God rejecting, it's something from below sinning and causing its own rejection. And we'll see this again on the 6th day. Generally speaking, the structure of the 6 days is that they're divided into 2 trios. And there's a correspondence between the last 3 days and the first 3 days. There's a connection between the first day and the 4th day, between the 2nd and the 5th, and between the 3rd and the 6th. There's a connection between them. There's a correspondence. So the 3rd and the 6th are a bit different. So what happens on the 3rd day? On the 3rd day, Hashem creates, the ground is revealed, and all the vegetation comes grows out of the ground. And then Hashem says that the earth is supposed to give rise to something called Etz Pli Ose Pli, a fruit tree which produces fruit. But then, as the same verse continues, that's what he decreed. But then when the earth gives rise to the tree, something else is written. It just gives rise to a tree that produces fruit, but not a fruit tree that produces fruit. So what's the difference? So Chazal, the sages, they say that the original idea, was for the trunk of the tree and the branches to also be fruit-like. Etz pri oseh pri means the etz, the trunk, is itself a pri. It doesn't just produce fruit, it's a fruit tree. It's literally a fruit tree. It's edible. So the idea was that the trunk and the branches would all be edible and sweet, but then the ground didn't heed God's decree, and it produced an inedible trunk and branches that give rise to fruit. And that's a sin, which is another rejection, a rejection of the potential to have a sweet edible tree. Fourth day, creation of sun and moon. The verse says that Hashem created the two great luminaries. And then it goes on to say that there was the great luminary for the day and the small luminary for the night. So the sages say, hang on, in the beginning of the verse it says two great luminaries. And then it says only one of them is great and the other one is small. What happened? And then they give a whole story that the moon was originally as bright as the sun, but then Hashem diminished the moon. And then the moon became, what's the opposite of transparent?
Translucent?
No, translucent is semi-transparent. There's something which isn't transparent at all. It's mute. There's a word for the opposite. It's opaque. The moon became opaque, and then it just reflects the light of the sun in a far weaker, paler version of it. But it was supposed to be as bright as the sun, but it was diminished. So that's the rejection or the diminishment of the fourth day. Fifth day, we have the birds and the fish being created. But then there's something very mysterious. Apart from the birds and the fish, there's one particular kind of fish which the fifth day of creation talks about, which is the two great taninim. Taninim can either be translated as crocodiles or whales or snakes. So I don't know in your translation what does it say, but the two sea giants, okay. And they could be dragons or dinosaurs. There are all kinds of ways to imagine them. But anyway, it's this sort of mythologically looking giant of the ocean. Two of them. They were created. It's one of the most mysterious things in the story of creation, because there's no one particular species which the Torah talks about.
Is it not Leviathan?
Yes.
It's
They're both Leviathan, yeah. They're both. One of them is called Leviathan Nachash Bariach, and the other one is called Leviathan Nachash Karaton. And Kabbalistically, the Leviathan Nachash Bariach is a straight snake, and the Leviathan Nachash Karaton is a round snake, which is known in the world as a Ouroboros, which is a snake that holds its own tail. So it's two snakes, one is male, one is female. So as we read the verses, we just see that they were created, and that's it. But there's a midrash that says that maybe if you just close the door, not all the way, just leave it just a tiny little bit open, because then people can open it. No, just open it a little bit. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So the Torah just talks about the two whales, or the two sea giants or serpents. But then the Midrash says that Hashem saw that if they would come together, their offspring would be so terrible, they would destroy the world. And so he killed the female, and he castrated the male, just to be on the safe side, although he doesn't have a female. But it's a very mysterious midrash in the Gemara. It says that Hashem killed the female serpent, Leviathan, and he castrated the male Leviathan. Okay? Sixth and final day. Here I'm going to diverge a little bit from Rabbi Kaplan. He said it's Eve sinning, because Eve was the first to sin, was the first to be tempted by the serpent, and she sinned, and she caused the exile from Garden of Eden, and she caused Adam to sin, so it was her downfall. It's not someone rejecting from above, it's like the ground that didn't heed God's word and produced the unsweet tree, or the inedible tree. Here it's Eve sinning, Chava. But I'm going to go a little bit different route, and I'm going to say that it's why I feel it's a bit weaker than the other five, because Chava is it's not in any midrash. It's explicitly said. It's not a hidden story. It's a revealed story. We know that she sinned, and also Adam also sinned immediately after. It wasn't just her. So there's another midrash which fits it more perfectly with this element being rejected. And this other midrash is about there being a woman before Eve. There's a midrash that says that there was a woman who preceded Eve, and Chazal call her Chava Rishona. No, they don't call it that. They call her Chava Rishona. First Chava, the first Eve. And she was equal to Adam, and she was created alongside with him from the dust, not from his rib or his side. But he ultimately didn't want her, and she was rejected, and she was brought back, turned back to dust.
So is she the one that would be the rejection of this thing?
Yeah. There's an element that was created, but immediately rejected.
But why? Do we know?
The question goes for all six things. Why was darkness?
No. So
why here? So hang on. Now we're going to open each and every of the six stories. So anyway, that's and according to Kabbalah, this first Chava then becomes she's very deeply hurt and angry and resentful, and she becomes a demon. And she becomes a demon, which the Kabbalistic and Hasidic tradition is not to pronounce her name. So it's not to psychologically summon her up, because she is a figure of temptation. But it's in Hebrew it's Lamed Yud Taf, Lilith, but the idea here is that she wasn't anything resembling bad. She was a perfect woman. She was a very, very spiritual and very equal to Adam. But for some reason she was rejected. So that's the sixth rejection, the human rejection. And so again, six stories, six rejections, hiding within the first 6 days: the rejection of darkness, the rejection of the lower waters, the sin of the ground that doesn't produce the fruit tree, and then the diminishment of the moon, and then the killing of the female Leviathan, and then finally the rejection of the first Eve, the first woman, the really first woman. So all these things are quite well known, but separate from one another. Like people who study Midrashim, they heard about this and that, and they know about the lower waters crying, or they know about the Leviathan, people who study. But just suddenly seeing them all together in one paragraph was amazing. And then they combine to tell us one grand narrative. And this great narrative is about again what I call the great spiral of being, which is there is always this part of creation, which is also part of divinity itself. In divinity, it's the Shekhinah, and here, which is the feminine aspect of divinity, and here it's something else. It has 6 variations, and they appear to be rejected. They appear to be bad or negative in some way. They appear to sin, or they appear to be unworthy, or they appear to be against the purpose of creation in some way, or about to destroy creation. But this rejection is part of a greater story, and the greater story is that they're not really rejected, and they're not really labeled bad or evil or negative, what's really going on. And in the paragraph that I saw from Rabbi Kaplan, he doesn't talk about this, but it's very clear when you open the Midrashim and the interpretations themselves, that it's really just a postponing the beginning of a process, the beginning of a journey in which all these 6 rejected elements are, like I said before, are seeds planted in the ground, which are then regrow and reblossom and become even higher and greater, and they reveal a higher level of divinity than all the other elements that were deemed positive and good and were not supposed to be rejected and were approved and chosen, so to speak. So now we have to go over them one by one and see how beautiful it is. So we'll start with the most general one, which is darkness. So the first day is, generally speaking, the most general day, because according to many Mefarshim, many interpreters, everything was created on the first day. And then he just hung the luminaries, and he produced the fruit, the vegetables, and he revealed the ground and so on. So the first day is very general. So the idea is this, the idea is that when we think about darkness, we think about darkness as the absence of light. We say darkness is really nothing, it's the absence of light. But according to Kabbalah and Chassidut, it's not like that. Darkness is something. The verse says, Hashem yotzer or uvore choshech. Or has to do with the Yetzirah. Yetzirah is something from something, it's formation.
Right.
And darkness has to do with creation, not formation, ex nihilo, something from nothing. So darkness is in a way higher than light. It's created, not just formed. It is something. It's not the lack of something, not the lack of light. It's something. What is it? It's the potential for more light. It's a light that has not yet been revealed. And there's a verse in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes, that King Solomon says, "Ra'iti yitron ha'chochma min ha'sichlut ki yitron ha'or min ha'choshech." I saw that wisdom is greater than foolishness, just as light is greater than darkness. But according to the Zohar, we should read the second half of the verse in a different way. We shouldn't say that light is greater than darkness, because that goes without saying. That's sort of simple. But it says, in the Hebrew, you can read the word Yitron ha'or min ha'choshech, not as saying that there's an advantage to light over darkness, or that light is greater than darkness, but you can read it as saying that light is greater from darkness. Yitron ha'or min ha'choshech. So the idea is that light that comes from darkness is greater than light that has been there all along. So what is darkness? Darkness is even higher lights than the lights we can see. And darkness is the Or Ganuz, the hidden light, the light that Hashem hid away after He created the world. This is really the darkness itself. So the idea is, again, it's very general, very broad, very abstract, but the idea is that everything that we experience is dark, negative, bad, is really just a potential light which is greater than the light that we have already. And if we go through the darkness, and if we rise up to the challenge and confront it, and go through with it, and realize that it's not just an accident or a mistake, and it was given to us as a challenge because there's deeper lights to be discovered within this dark element or period or experience that we have. So again, this is the first thing, that choshech appears to be negative and bad, and it's rejected, and light is called good and bad, and the darkness isn't. But really darkness is the light that comes from darkness, which is really already there in the darkness. And it's just a light that hasn't been revealed. It's just like, by the way, black holes. Black holes are suns that swallow up their own light. Their gravity is so high that they push in their own light. But we see it as black, but it's really extremely bright, far brighter than regular suns. So it's the same idea here. So that's the first thing. And it's broad because it encapsulates all the other elements. Now, second story, second day, the waters. lower waters were rejected, pushed away down, became far from Hashem. They're not as close to Hashem. The sky is transparent, and people look at the sky and they can feel that there's something spiritual above them. And the word spirit comes from air. Spirit is air. But then the lower waters, and also rainwater is pure, you can just drink it. But the lower waters have been pushed away. So then the Midrash says that they cried, and then they became angry. They became bitter. In Hebrew, the word bitter and the word rebellion come from the same root. Meri. Meri is rebellion, and it comes from mar, which is bitter. So the lower waters are bitter, embittered, and then they try to wipe out the world. That's what the Midrash says. Not because they were bad, but because they were rejected. It's like a child that's rejected, downtrodden, and then he becomes angry and becomes vengeful. So they try to do a flood, to flood the world. And Hashem stops them, and he puts a line, he draws a line that they can't cross. But then he says, but I know you did it because you love me, and because you miss me, and because you want to be near me. So I'm not going to punish you, I'm going to reward you. That's what the Midrash says. What's the reward? There's a mitzvah called nisuch mayim, the pouring of the water on the altar in Sukkot. There's also the salt that's being put on the altar with the sacrificial gifts. And then finally it says, for the higher realms to praise me, they will have to ask your permission. The higher waters, or the angels, before they praise me, they have to ask for your permission. You will have an advantage, and you will be first to sing praises to me. So what does all this mean or symbolize? So in the Zohar, there's an amazing idea that explains this. The Zohar says that the original water from the first day of creation, there were just one water, that Hashem's spirit hovered over the waters, just waters, and there's one water. That's God's original wisdom. It's one, it's endless, and it's Hashem's wisdom. It's the original Torah. But then Hashem takes his Torah and splits it in two. And the upper half, that's still called Torah. And that's the Torah that we got on Mount Sinai. But the second half was buried where? Within nature, within human beings. It's not divine wisdom, it's mundane wisdom. If you don't study Torah and you study just secular mundane wisdom, that's like drinking seawater. And it's so to speak poisonous. It is poisonous to your soul when that's all your diet. You just study secular mundane wisdom because it tells you of a world that is ultimately, it looks to be godless. And that's the idea of the lower waters being mixed up with salts and minerals and things that we can't drink. But the idea is that in the end of days, we will clarify the lower waters. And because all this wisdom, whether it's science or art or poetry or human emotions, all the things that are symbolized by the lower waters have originally been part of the Torah. The original, full, primordial Torah was both. So if we clarify the water, if we, in today, the state of Israel has become a desalination superpower because it invented all these amazing methods to desalinate water, take away the salt. So it becomes drinkable, or at least because you can water the ground with it, which you can't with seawater. So the idea is that maybe the reason the state of Israel has become a desalination superpower is because the purpose of the people of Israel is to be a spiritual desalination superpower, or to be something that comes to all the wisdoms of the world, chokhmah b'goyim ta'amin, take all the wisdom of science and art, which mostly, at least in today's world, hides away faith and spirituality. It serves to depict a godless world. But if we take it and we clarify it and we take away the salt and we find the water within the salt, then it becomes sweet and it becomes it's It's an English class. Shul Banglit. Shul Banglit. Oh, yeah, of course. Great to see you again. It's your birthday today, yesterday. Yeah, I saw it on Facebook. Nice to see you again. So, in the Zohar it says that the idea is that we need to clarify all these wisdoms and ideas, and then once we do that, and we reconnect the ideas that we found in science and in the academic world and in art and in our own emotions, the emotions that bubble up from below, not those that come from above and are pure and happy and full of light, and we can just drink it like rainwater. But all the things that are bitter, that are salty, that has to do with tears, has to do with feeling distant from Hashem, not feeling close to Hashem. That's where all the greatest prayers come from, and that's where the completion of the Torah will come from, because the Messianic Torah is a recreation or a re-revelation of the primordial Torah, which is all the hidden Torah, which is buried within nature, again, within science and art and so on. So again, we've something pushed away, and now we think, oh, secular wisdom, that's the opposite of Kedusha, and but the sparks that are there, and the divine wisdom that is there within nature, that is discoverable by science, and within our own hearts and psyches that are discoverable by art. All this it just needs to be reconnected, resewn with the higher waters, with Torah. You need both in order to do this dissemination process.
And that's something that we can do now?
Yeah, all of these things have to do with our generation, with things going on today. So today, science and art have become the most secular on the one hand, but the most revealing of the deepest emotions of humankind, and also the deepest secrets within nature, far more than in previous generations. So the lower waters that have been rejected before are now come to a point in which they should be clarified and cleaned and made drinkable again, and then this reveals to us the primordial full Messianic Torah, which is the full picture.
We're saying also that our tears, because it's the salt water, and that's the big thing on it.
Yeah, and why did the higher waters need to ask permission of the lower waters to say prayers? Because you can think about art that's too optimistic, There are shiurim and classes and ideas that everything is happy, everything is good, everything is positive, and it doesn't echo as real, as true. The lower waters, when you meet the distance, when you meet the pain, when you meet the feeling of longing, when you meet the feeling of not understanding and not knowing, just like darkness. So that's when you're able to really praise Hashem and because then you know what it's like not to have Him. It's not everything is so optimistic. So the idea is that the deepest prayers and the deepest secrets within the Torah will come from art and science and poetry and experiences of crying. So from our tears will come the sweetest waters. That's the idea.
We also learned, I remember from Bereshis, that the salt is, back in the days when they didn't have refrigeration, they would use salt because the salt preserves.
It has a property of eternity to it.
Right, so that's why we need to eat it with the bread, because the bread is like the gashmiut, so this is what salt takes away that material that is prone to decay.
Yeah. Yeah, the salt is on the one hand what makes seawater undrinkable, so it appears to be the negative element. But once you separate it, it becomes very precious. Salt used to be as precious as money once. The word salary comes from salt. In the Roman army, they would give the salary with chunks of salt when they didn't have money, because it's so precious. So salt is the element which is the most. It appears to be the most rejectful of emunah, of spirituality, and of faith, but it can be flipped upside down because there's intense energy within it, so to speak. The power to reject Hashem, to say it doesn't exist, is an amazing power. It comes from Hashem himself. This power to say that God doesn't exist and the world created itself or holds itself up without Hashem, that's a very divine idea. something which is so autonomous, it doesn't need to be created. So there's something about the most atheistic picture of reality, which is also the most salty picture, in the sense that it makes the waters the most undrinkable, or the opposite of Torah, is also there's something very holy there. It's put on the altar, the salt. So, third day, the ground, instead of producing a fruit tree which produces fruit, it just creates a regular tree that produces fruit. How can you understand this? So very, very simply put, what is a tree? A tree is a very, very big and elaborate mechanism which is supposed to produce fruit. The whole point of the tree is to grow and produce fruit, which then holds the seed for a future tree. And that's how it grows and expands, and then it does a lot of other things. So the idea is that the trunk and the branches are like the means for something, and the fruit is like the goal. There's an end and a means. And the original idea was that for it to be a fruit tree which produces fruit meant that the world was supposed to be a place in which the process is as delightful as the goal. And instead, we got a world in which people say, well, I'm going to work now for many, many years, and then I'll be able to retire when I'm old. Or I'll work all week, and then I'll have the weekend to rest. Or I'm going to work all day, and I don't like my work, but I'm going to do my work, so that in the evening, I can go home and watch television. And that means we're not enjoying the process. Instead of a tree that is itself sweet and edible, and the fruit in the end is also sweet and edible, we experience life so that we have to, clench our teeth and swallow some frogs and do some things we don't like and get over with and get them over with, so that we get to the place that we want to get. But that's not how we were supposed to be. And the idea is that in the end of days, we'll have the original reality back. We'll have an esprit au seprit, the tree itself, the means, the journey, the process, the stages we have to go through in order to get to where we are. We see the divine light, the tam, the taste, the meaning. In Hebrew, taste and meaning is the same word, tam. There's two words for meaning in Hebrew. One is mashma'ut, comes from hearing, and the other is tam, which comes from taste. So to get a taste for something is to understand its meaning. You can say the meaning of life. You can say in Hebrew, ta'am ha'chaim, the flavor of life, the taste of life. It's the same word. So when the process, the journey becomes meaningful, then the tree becomes sweet. The trunk becomes edible. And now in today's reality, we see this, that many people have rejected the West. Why? Because the West is too much goal-oriented. You want to have a career so that you become rich and you're able to retire. You want to work so that you can rest, and you're not. And people are running and rushing and not paying attention to the present moment. And then you have all these New Age movements coming along, inspired by Eastern religions, which talk about don't put the accent on the goals in the end. Enjoy the moment, be in the moment, the power of now. Just experience the world as a circle, not as a line, and so on. But here the idea is that we want to combine the line and the circle. The line is about producing fruit, and we want new fruit all the time. But in enjoying the path and being there in the process and appreciating it and seeing that it has also flavor, and I'm learning things on the way, I'm meeting Hashem in other ways, through the failure, through the process, through the time it takes for things to happen. You can see that one of the things that all the elements, the three elements we have until now, the waters and the darkness and the flavor of the tree or the journey, has to do with time. The darkness is light which will be revealed over time. If you go through the darkness, if you struggle, if you find the light that's hidden there, it's light that can't be revealed on the first day. That's why it first appears as darkness, which is rejected. So that we go into the darkness and we find the light within it. And the waters have the wisdom that's hiding there. It's even greater, but it needs the entire history of science and art and the development of humankind and the development of our own hearts and emotions in order for us to feel how far away we are and then come up with a new prayer and a new song and a new appreciation of divinity. It takes time. So the idea is that the positive elements, the things that heeded Hashem's decree, all the other vegetables and the higher waters and the light, that's the things that can be revealed immediately. They have to do with being, not with becoming. The rejected elements are rejected because they really put on a journey of becoming and revealing Hashem over time, over process. Fourth day, diminishment of the moon. So, the Midrash says that first there were just two great luminaries, sun and the moon. And then, now the version that all frum kids know, that they heard it when they were a kid, and everyone is doing tshuva and studying Torah knows this story, but then we have the other Kabbalistic version. So the first version is in the Gemara, and it says that there were the sun and the moon, they're both equally bright. And then the moon said, and the moon is referred to in the female, pronoun. And so the moon says, how come, she says, can it be that there are two kings and one crown? And we all are accustomed to hearing this as meaning it's not a good idea, it's not a good thing to have two kings and one crown. There should be one king and one crown, so you should dethrone one of us and make them not king anymore. And then Hashem says, okay, so diminish yourself, dethrone yourself if you think there should be one king. So she says, wait, but I said something, if you agree with me, it means I said something good. If I said something good, why do I have to be the diminished one? So everyone says, well, she coveted the throne. She wanted to be the sole ruler. So she had in mind that the son will be the one diminished, and she will be the ruling one. That's how everyone reads the story. So, and then the diminishment is like a punishment. It says, you wanted to be the sole ruler, so now you're going to be the one dethroned. And then she says, no, why are you doing this to me? If you agree with me, and then he starts telling her the advantages of being small. He says you'll be able to visit during the day, and the sun can't visit during the night, but the moon can visit during the day because it's small. And you also, the Jewish calendar will be lunar. And finally it says that the tzaddikim, the righteous people, are going to be compared to moons because they're humble. And she's not convinced. But Hashem doesn't go back on his words, and he diminishes her. And it also is a story of a punishment. Then he says, I want you to bring a sacrifice to atone for my diminishing the moon. An amazing story in the Gemara. So for generations and generations, everyone thought the moon was this selfish creature who wanted the throne for herself. And because the moon is feminine, it also comes out as a bit anti-women. But then comes the Ari and says, no, you should read it in a totally different way. The question, can it be the two kings will use one crown? She wasn't trying in a sophisticated way to dethrone anyone. She was asking a genuine question. She said, now we're two kings with two crowns. I have my crown, and he has his crown. And we're separate. Can we be two kings with one crown? Can it be? Is it possible? Can you make it? Can you introduce me to the sun so we get married and we have one crown, we come together, it's greater, it's better. And Hashem was very happy. He wanted this question. But he says, so because she didn't do anything bad, the diminishment isn't the punishment. The diminishment is that he says, now, in order for you to marry the sun and be face to face and not back to back with each of your crown, you have a journey, you have a story to tell, you have a journey to go through. That's your story, that's the moon. The moon isn't identical to the sun, maybe as bright, but you're not identical, you're equal but different. And the difference is that you know time, you become over time. You have to diminish and then regrow and reshine, and then you'll have your own light. And she doesn't like it at the beginning because it's hard. It's hard to be weak. It's hard to be poor. It's hard to be a helpless child. Everything that has to do with time. If you're born an adult like Adam, you don't suffer through the agonies of childhood. If you're born rich, you don't suffer through the agonies of being poor. If you're born smart, or you had an education from early on, you don't know. But all the moon characters, the children and the poor and the ones that haven't got an education now, they have to work on something very hard. They're opaque like the moon, but they have to rediscover their own light. And this process is painful, it's hard. That's why the moon says, no, don't diminish me. But he says, no, it's for your own good, because then when you regrow, in the prophets it says that one day the moon will be again as bright as the sun. Then your light will re-emerge. It has to do with the two Hebrew words, chokhmah and binah, wisdom and understanding. Wisdom is more masculine, it's like the sun. There's a connection between the word chokhmah and the word chama, which is the word for the sun. And then binah is understanding. It's a different kind of wisdom. And that is connected to the word levana, which means moon. And so this binah, chokhmah, appears in one moment of inspiration. But binah takes time to study and learn and understand. So the whole idea of the moon growing gradually over the years is the idea of a different kind of understanding, different kind of way of looking at the world, there's sunlight and moonlight. Sunlight is wisdom, and moonlight is understanding, and there's something more feminine. And we can also see this in the rise of femininity in our generation, right? We had science and arts in the previous day, and we had none of it was there on the second day. And on the third day, we had people rejecting the West, going for Eastern religions in order to appreciate the moment and the journey. And we have people understanding that darkness is a way that's eternal, that understanding the darkness is just a way to rediscover greater light. But now we have the rise of feminism. Because why was it so that men were in control of education and politics throughout history from the very beginning, but women are only, their voice is heard or their wisdom is discovered only now, in the past 100 years. So you can blame the patriarchy, or you can blame biology that made women weaker and have wombs and have periods and so on. But theologically, it's not an answer, because why was it created like this in the first place? So the story of the diminishment of the moon is, in a way, an answer to this. It says that femininity is a kind of light that is revealed over a longer journey of time. Just like the father's contribution to procreation is momentary, but then the mother's contribution to procreation takes over 9 months. A whole journey over time of gradual blossoming, of gradual awakening. So we can say that not women, but femininity over history is like a late bloomer. But when it blooms, then it's discovered that this whole process was just to reveal another aspect of divinity, the aspect of Binah, the aspect of Shekhinah. And it couldn't have been any other way. If they were both have had their full stature revealed on the first day of creation, then they would both be masculine. It wouldn't be femininity. So femininity has to do with this moonlight, which needs to experience to a greater extent the pain of this world, the weakness of this world, what it means not to be in the spotlight, what it means not to be in control. And then there's, for example, a greater affinity to the weak, greater empathy. Many, many virtues are created by virtue of this gradual growth.
So this process is the moon waxing and waning?
So the moon waxing and waning reflects a greater journey of one big waning, which would lead to a greater waxing until it even waxes and it becomes like the sun, and reclaims its original light. So each and every one of these ideas could be like a whole book or a whole series of lessons. And I worked on a book with my Rav about unifying science and Torah in our generation. And it all has to do with the lower waters. So it's one big book just about the lower waters. And there is another book that I have coming out soon about the women of the Bible, and how each and every one of them reflects the idea of femininity meant to rise in the future, in our own generation. Now, 2 more days to go. So, 5th day. What are the 2 Leviathans that are killed? What do they symbolize? What does it mean to have this monster or giant of the sea? So there's actually also a land giant in the Tanakh, in the Bible, which is either called Behemoth or Shor Habal, or the wild bull. It's 2 variations on the same thing, which is a great mythological land giant. And then there's also the sea giant. So and creation focuses on the sea giants. What's the difference? So the idea in Kabbalah is that they symbolize two kinds of tzaddikim. The land monsters or giants are the tzaddikim of the revealed aspect of the Torah, of Jewish law, of Gemara, of Halacha. Giants, that's like the behemoth, and that's like the bull.
What's that up here, behemoth?
In Yov, when Hashem, book of Job, when Hashem reveals himself to Job at the end of the book, he tells him, where have you been when I created the world? And then he describes all these mythological creatures. And then he talks about both the Leviathan and the land giant. And it appears also in other verses, scattered across the prophets. So the land giants are the Nigla giants. They have been there all along. They have always been great. All the sages have been giants of Jewish law. That's the revealed level, and it's only expanding and growing, and it's always been there from the very beginning, from the beginning of at least of the wisdom age within Judaism, after the Babylonian exile. But then you have the hidden tzaddikim, the Kabbalists. They have a different story. The 2 Leviathans, one is killed, the female Leviathan is killed, and the male Leviathan is castrated. But then the Midrash says the female Leviathan isn't just killed, it's preserved in salt for the end of days. And in the end of days, all the tzaddikim will have a feast. They will feast on its flesh, and they will also reside in a tabernacle, in a sukkah made of its skin. So again, we have the same motif. Feminine aspect being rejected only to reappear in the end of days and be greater than its male counterpart. So the male Leviathan is alive all these years, but it's castrated, and Hashem plays with him. But at the end of the days, he's not the interesting type. He's not the interesting character in the play. The interesting character in the play is the female one, which has been killed off from the very beginning, only to be preserved for this messianic, redemption time meal.
So even though he was castrated, he's still not considered.
He's not the one being eaten. He's not the rejected one. No, he remains, and Hashem plays with him every day. Leviathan we created the Leviathan to play with.
Yeah.
So the feminine one appears to be the more dangerous one. Chazal even say he could just have castrated as a way to castrate the female one. No, it wouldn't have helped. She's stronger. And you don't need to kill the male one because he's not as strong. But you have to kill the female one. So she has, but in the end of days, she becomes both the surrounding light of the sukkah and the inner light of the food that the tzaddikim eat. What does all this symbolize? So we can say The two Leviathans stand for, like we said, the inner dimension of the Torah, the Kabbalah dimension, the Sod dimension. It's hidden, just like water is hidden. You don't see it on the surface. It's hiding, just like fish hide. But there's a difference. There's a male aspect to Kabbalah and a female aspect to Kabbalah. What is the male aspect of Kabbalah? That's the regular Kabbalah that it appears in almost all books of Kabbalah. It's very technical, it's very high, it's only for a precious few people. It has to do with the higher world and how they're built and maintained. And of course, only men would study it. And it was only very few men, and it was never supposed to be revealed to anyone. It's castrated, you can't tell it to anyone. Only precious few people who are initiated can study this. And it doesn't spread beyond that. What is the female aspect of Kabbalah? The female aspect of Kabbalah would be Chassidut. Chassidut is the Baal Shem Tov revolution, which is again has to do with the modern era, modern time. Why is it the feminine aspect of Kabbalah? Because it doesn't want to talk about the higher world and the higher Sefirot. It wants to talk about how all these, it wants to use the language of Kabbalah, the esoteric language that talks about the hidden dimension of reality in order to understand our own souls, our own hearts, to do our own avodah, our own, the process and the work we have to do within ourselves in order to open our hearts to Hashem and to the Torah and to really connect to Hashem. And not to study Torah from a detached technical perspective, which doesn't only happen to people who study Gemara and Halakha, it also happens to Kabbalists. The greatest wise people that the Baal Shem Tov drew to Chassidut were giants in Kabbalah, that they would study, they would detach from their own hearts. They would think about it as this amazing wisdom, but they would repress their own feelings in their own hearts. So that was a feminine process of trying to see how all the wisdom of the Torah penetrates your heart and is alive within your heart. It means you have to deal with your heart, and it was considered feminine, but the Baal Shem Tov says, no, it's for everyone. And that's why very, very early on, very quickly, especially in Chabad we see this, but also in other Chassidiyot, it became something for women also. That women, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe would stress this very much, that all women are obligated to study Chassidut, just as men are obligated, and they even have a better sense of it than men do. They have an intuitive understanding of Chassidut more than men do. So the idea is that this is the element of the Torah which, so to speak, was killed off or buried or disappeared from Judaism very early on, but is only now in later generations, in our modern era, is now beginning to, the Baal Shem Tov came in order to revive the female Leviathan, in order for us to be in the sukkah of the skin of the Leviathan and to eat the flesh of the Leviathan, the female Leviathan. So again, we needed to have this distance. It needed to be buried. It belongs to the hidden dimension of the Torah. And it's the feminine aspect of the hidden dimension of the Torah, which we needed to have the male element first to study all the structures of Kabbalah and the ideas, so that then we can take them and use them to understand our own hearts and souls, and then reach this greater connection, which is both within us and outside us, just like the sukkah and the meal of the... Now, final day, the first Chava, the first Eve. So the first Chava, like we said, was this woman of great stature, equal to man. She wasn't created out of his rib or his side. She wasn't created after him. She was created alongside with him, just like the first story of creation appears to tell us. Zachar u'nekeva bara otam.
Why is this not every other thing?
It's all in the Midrashim. All of them in the Midrashim. It doesn't say that the darkness holds deeper light in the verses. It doesn't say that the lower waters will one day be sweetened and become...
No, yes, but it does mention the lower waters, and it does... But Chava Rishonah is not mentioned.
No, she's hinted at in several ways. The first being, there being two stories. In the first story, it's very clear that they're equal, and they're only together do they reflect the image of God. Hashem, let us create man in our own image, and then he creates male and female, he created them. And it's very clear that that's the image of God, and it's not just one of them, or one of them more than the other in any way. But the second story appears to apply a hierarchy, that man is first, and then he is alone, and then a woman is created. But this is the beginning of the journey of reclaiming and rediscovering the lost femininity of the first story. So the idea is this, that the first Chava was equal to Adam, and they had the most amazing intellectual relationship. But she was too spiritual. She didn't have the feminine traits that we associate with traditional femininity that have to do with being connected to the body and to fertility and to the ground and to nature. She didn't have this. She was too spiritual. She was like him. She was in a way masculine in some way. So he didn't want her. He didn't like her. He liked her as a friend. He liked her as someone to talk to, but not as someone to raise a family, not as someone to marry. And we see this in life, that there's someone may have this girlfriend, and it says that you have the greatest conversations with you, my best friend, but I can't marry you. I need someone, I don't know, I need someone else. And so Hashem, she's rejected and is returned to dust. And then a second Chava is created. This time, she is not his equal, and she's not as spiritual. She's far more earthly, more connected to her body and to fertility and to nature and to the cycles of nature. She looks up to him, and he looks down at her a little bit. And he likes this, and she likes this also, because that's how they're both created. But what about first Chava? Is she gone? Has she disappeared? No. Her body was returned to the dust. But according to Kabbalah, her soul remains. It remains bodiless and homeless. And then it takes on the form of a female demon, which is the demon of, like I said before, we don't say. Because then she puts on the form of a temptress and of a demon, of someone who wants to separate the man and the woman. And she even wants to destroy their own relationship. She wants the man to objectify the woman, to see her as a sexual object. And she could even tempt the woman to objectify herself, to present herself as a temptress, and to betray her own inner world. So she's a demon, she's a negative element. But the idea is that she is really the rejected, tearful, hurt soul of the first Chava. So now she takes on negative form. But really, deep down, she's crying. Her name comes from the word Yelala, which is a cry of anguish. She's crying. Why was I rejected? Why is there no room for me in the world? I'm smart, I'm creative, I'm amazing, I could be the best, I have so much to give and so much and I could have the best. And why is this woman the wife of Adam? And the idea here is that from this point onwards, there's a whole journey in which femininity grows and grows until it reclaims and reabsorbs the light of the first Chava. So the second Chava, the femininity, traditional femininity, as we've known it over most of history, is supposed to grow and grow until not betray its own nature, because that's an essential part of femininity. But so that it's not just in the home and just in the kitchen and just with the children. It's that also, but it's also, it restores the light. It grows gradually, it takes time. It can't happen immediately. You need to have the evolution of womanhood over history. You need to have the evolution of science also and technology that would be able to bring about more equality. And then the more it grows, the deep meaning of feminism, according to this idea, is that it's really the light of the first Chava being re-revealed, rediscovered in our own era. And then the final woman, or the final womanhood, is a combination of the two Eves. And the second Eve returns, and then she doesn't have to be a demon anymore. She becomes positive. She becomes the first Chava instead of being this sad and angry archetype of a frustrated kind of femininity. And the idea is that this is the deep reason for feminism in our generation, is that the time has come for us to for women especially, but also men have work to do here because they have to fight their own demon. There's also a male demon that's within them. That's Yaakov fighting the angel of Esav and then becoming Israel. That's the male work, not to belittle the woman and not to objectify her and not to see her as only physical or only natural, to see that she has the potential to be the higher original Chava also, and learn from her and grow from her. So it's a work that the two sexes have to work on. But the idea is that it's supposed to reconstruct and reclaim the original Adam and Chava, which were equal together and just like in the first story of creation. So again, we have what appears to be the tragedy of patriarchy or the tragedy of human biology, that women couldn't be involved as much as men in influencing the world, and now it's growing. It shouldn't be a battle against men in any way, or against, it's not a battle of the sexes. It's supposed to be something very positive. That and it's an art, we can say it's an art of balancing the two Eves. So if we go back, if it's too much, we need to finish this because the battery is about to stop. If it's only the first Chava, it doesn't have a vessel. If it's only the second Chava, it doesn't have the lights. So that's a great spiral of being, as it manifests in 6 different variations on a theme in the story of creation, in the story of Bereshis. It's a very grand shiur, this class was. Very big, too big. In future shiurim, we'll take one element and smaller idea and focus on it. But this was, it's a monumental Parsha, so it was a monumental class in some ways.
Wow.
And I'm going to stop this so that we have